Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with broadcaster and commentator Duncan Barks and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Daily Mirror has the headline Ring of Steel after Parliament passed emergency legislation to save British Steel's Scunthorpe blast furnaces. The Sunday Times adds that ministers could send the Royal Navy to escort fuel shipments to Scunthorpe. The Observer leads with Chancellor Rachel Reeves calling for far-reaching changes to global trade in order to protect the UK from Donald Trump's tariffs. The Telegraph reports on the Manchester Arena terrorist who attacked 3 prison officers today with hot cooking oil and homemade weapons. The Mail reports on a new memo that may support Lucy Letby's legal fight to overturn her convictions of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others. Dream On, the Sunday Express quotes the Queen after she was asked if the King would be taking things a bit easier after his recent hospital admission. The Sunday People reports on the successful removal of TV presenter Davina McCall's brain tumour. And we are joined tonight by broadcaster and commentator Duncan Barks and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Welcome. Always good to see you on what has been quite a busy news day, especially, I guess, for a Saturday. Not often that Parliament gets recalled, and that obviously the headline in so many of the papers. Let's start with the Mirror. Good headline there, Ring of Steel. MPs vote to protect the works. Duncan, start us off on this.
Yeah, so as you say, an historic day. First time that Parliament has sat on a Saturday and in recess since 1982 with the Falklands invasion. And we had the Commons and the Lords all debating the Steel Industry Special Measures Bill. So that was a bit of legislation that was being debated today. And some commentators saying it's a step closer towards nationalisation, but this particular bill is not about nationalising the steelworks at Scunthorpe. I think there's 2 angles to this story. There's the political side of it and the people side of it. So the political side, we had various political leaders today in Parliament. You know, we had Labour saying the Tories didn't do enough when they were in power. We had the Tories saying that Labour should have done more in the last few months. We had the Lib Dems blaming Trump and steel tariffs. We had Reform saying nationalise and the Green Party saying nationalise. I think I've covered it all. So we had all of this going on and they were ripping chunks out of each other. And the thing that always strikes me is the pictures that we're going to see on some of the other front pages, which is the people aspect of this particular story. 135 years of making steel in Scunthorpe, 3,000 jobs potentially on the line. And you know, we've seen in the past, I mean, if you look at the mining towns of the 1970s and 1980s, when those pits shut down, those communities collapse because they are the major employer. And it's not just about the jobs in the area in terms of that particular plant, but also it's about the ripple effects of the local economy and the impact it has. So what we're going to see now is the British government having more of a control over this particular plant. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next. But basically, the legislation now allows for enough coal to be brought in to keep the furnaces burning, because if they go out, they can never be restarted.
I mean, Duncan, you mentioned that the pictures, the human angle. Let's just pull up the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, where we can see that picture on the Sunday Telegraph. And it is basically a young girl, but really there was a march of Union members to the Scunthorpe United football ground, obviously, you know, to show their support and hoping that it was going to be kept open. 3,000 jobs at play. Christina.
Yes, it's a fantastic photo that really, really does capture the human side of it. And Duncan's right, this does have lots of political dimensions and then more practical dimensions. And, you know, one of the obvious practical implications of Trump's madness over the last week is that, you know, nobody is safe from his tariffs and his changes in policy every 2 minutes. And we do need to have our own supply of steel. And since Trump is slapping tariffs all over China and changing his mind all the time, we absolutely need them for railway tracks, we need them for all kinds of things. And one of the sort of more dramatic elements of this story is the race against time, because if the furnaces go out, I don't really understand why they can't be relit, but it seems to be the case that if they run out, they can't be relit. So you need to keep them lit, which hence the emergency action. And you know, they've succeeded in doing that with this bill being passed today. But the political aspect, which is very interesting is that it does give Labour an opportunity to say we are for working people, we are for traditional workers, we are for the traditional manufacturing towns that have been so run down. And I think, you know, there have been lots of accusations of Labour switching to the right in some aspects. People don't really know necessarily what Keir Starmer actually believes. And this is a way to send all kinds of signals, which is about kind of British strength, British workers and so on.
I mean, you mentioned the Trump tariffs. Obviously, that's a complication. But in the Commons and elsewhere, the accusation is also towards China in general and this company specifically. I mean, and Duncan, what did you make of that angle? And do you think the issue is the Chinese ownership, or is it more of an issue that certain industries should not be under foreign ownership, full stop?
I think it's both. So we had Ian Duncan Smith on Sky News earlier talking about, and he's long been a critic of China and the security implications. So we have China owning British steel. We want steel security. This is an example of how close we came to losing that security. That then gets us into the wider issue about overseas ownership of some of the things that keep this country ticking over. We were talking earlier, weren't we, about the water companies. You know, a lot of water companies in this country are owned by the French. Now, the French, I think it's fair to say, are not the same kind of potential threat as China, but it does get you into this area since the world has changed quite significantly for two reasons, with Trump in the White House being a little bit unpredictable, and also the Ukraine-Russia war. I think we need to look at things in a very different way, and I find myself, as someone who's not necessarily a fan of nationalisation of certain companies, thinking if we want steel security for the reasons you outlined, so we can have railway tracks, build warships and stuff.
Well, defence spending, of course, is crucial.
We probably need to own it, don't we?
Well, it's hard to see what alternative there will be to nationalisation, because this is not going to look like a great commercial prospect for any company. It's going to be incredibly expensive. It's apparently going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds a day to keep these steelworks going, and that's to keep 3,000 workers in their jobs, but more importantly, to keep our supply of steel. So I can't see any company snapping that up, and this is going to be very expensive for the British taxpayer.
There's different angles as well. If we look at the Sunday Times, interesting headline here. I'd like you to explain it, both of you. A Navy on alert to escort fuel in steel crisis. Why?
Well, this is another dramatic... I mean, this is turning into a kind of spy story, and it's not quite clear how this has emerged because nobody has confirmed it. But it is, I think, about needing the coke to, as in not the type you snort up your nostrils, the coke that's needed to keep the furnaces going. And so there has been talk of the Navy being sent to escort a fuel shipment, but this hasn't been confirmed, and it's not actually clear where this story is coming from. But it does show that the stakes are very high, which, you know, does turn it into a kind of, you know, ticking bomb kind of situation.
Before you go on, we've just received a statement from the Ministry of Defence. It says, while the Royal Navy routinely monitors ships due to arrive in UK waters, we are not involved in escorting this ship.
But there's a paragraph in this story which is so intriguing, and you're right, it is like something out of a spy novel, where they say a senior source said last night the government was considering the extraordinary move to ensure the cargo reached the UK without being intercepted or redirected.
I know, exactly.
Well, it makes you wonder who's going to intercept it. It's like some Bond movie and some villain who's going to nick the ship.
I mean, it's not going to be Somali pirates, is it?
No.
Let's move on to the Telegraph now. A very sombre story, this. And it's an attack on 3 prison officers in Frankland Prison in County Durham. And this is the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber, who, you know, quite a vicious attack from what we're hearing. The 3 prison officers were hospitalised. Duncan.
Yeah, so we heard about this earlier this afternoon, and as you rightly say, it's the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber. We know that 2 officers have suffered life-threatening injuries after being attacked at the prison in Durham by Hasham Abedi, in a case that the Telegraph is saying is going to raise questions about security measures at this particular prison. It appears that they were attacked with hot oil, and there are some conflicting reports at the moment regarding how the officers were stabbed, whether or not this particular prisoner managed to steal a knife from a kitchen or some kind of homemade weapon. But it does get you into this whole debate that has been running about concerns about certain prisons and Islamic extremists and their ability to almost take over certain areas of prisons. And that's what the Sunday Telegraph is alluding to in this story.
Yeah, I mean, it does. You do kind of think, why does this person want to do this? I mean, he's already aided his brother to do that horrific act at Manchester, and those children, you know, just you think of the parents and you know, the absolute tragedy that happened. What on earth does he think he's achieving as a jihadist in stabbing prison officers and throwing boiling oil over them? It's absolutely disgusting. But I have to say, I can't say I'm surprised by the security lapse, because we're constantly hearing about the terrible state that Britain's prisons are in.
But so, for example, he was allowed to cook his own food.
Yeah, I mean, that seems completely mad. It seems completely crazy. And, you know, we're also very often hearing that prisons are awash with drugs, mobile phones, all kinds of things that shouldn't be allowed in. So
This is obviously a high-security one.
Yeah, well, clearly not very high security. Well, I mean, that's the trouble. And I think that is one of our... We do have... And it's not clear what the cause is, but certainly after 14 years of Tory austerity, many of our public services, including prisons, are in a terrible state. And it's clear that something has gone very, very badly wrong with prisons.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, but we are obviously following developments with that story. And of the 3 prison officers, 1 has been discharged from hospital, but the other 2, we understand, are still in hospital. Duncan, Christina, stay with us. Coming up, on the front of the Sunday Times, an MP who had landed in Hong Kong to see her newborn grandson says that she was stopped at security and put on the first flight home without being given a reason why. We'll look at that story coming up.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters. We love Trump! I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor, free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes. Sky News, the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Duncan Barks and Christina Patterson. Let's go straight to the Sunday Times, and quite a sort of puzzling story here. Christina, start us off on this. It's a Lib Dem MP who went to Hong Kong. She wanted to see her newborn grandson and was effectively turned right back round and put on a plane back home.
Yeah, it's a very alarming story, this one. Her son was standing in the arrivals hall and she couldn't see her son. She couldn't see her new grandson. Her husband, who's a businessman, was allowed into Hong Kong. But, I mean, this has all happened really so quickly, and you think that, you know, until the Chinese takeover of Hong Kong, obviously Hong Kong was a place where you could say what you wanted, and then we had those horrifying demonstrations which China crushed. And the reason, I mean, it's alarming because Vera Hobhouse is on the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, which scrutinises Beijing's approach to human rights, which obviously Beijing isn't very happy about. But the reason this is particularly poignant at the moment is obviously we have the two world's leading superpowers, China and America, at loggerheads, locked in a trade war. And we know that China limits human rights, and obviously that's one of the reasons people like Ian Duncan Smith and many, many others are wary about us having too close relationship on the trading front or any other front. But the fact that America is also now stopping people from going into the country for any mention, any criticism of Trump or MAGA on social media or on their phones, a French scientist was sent back, means that this is just an indication of the way that the world is turning against freedom of speech.
What was she told about why she was being turned back? Or
well, there was no explanation, was there? She was just escorted by officials to the boarding gate by 4 immigration officials. But it wasn't just a case of being told, you're not welcome in this country. Her luggage was searched, and she was also swabbed, which, I mean, is... you just kind of don't expect it. And this does get us into this whole area about... and there were criticisms in the past made of Israel because of the MPs they wouldn't allow into Israel. These are representatives of the British Parliament, and they're being treated like some kind of criminal.
Yeah,
the world has changed.
Yeah, it really has changed. It's extremely alarming, and unfortunately America seems to be on the side of this suppression of freedom of speech and political speech. I mean, when a British MP is turned away from Hong Kong or scientists are turned away from America, these are really alarming times. And then we have J.D. Vance coming to lecture Europe on freedom of speech. Oh, the irony.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what comes out and if she's ever given an explanation as to why she was sent back. If we look at The Observer now, of course, it's, 10 days, 12 days since Liberation Days, of course, the whole tariff.
I feel so free, Barbara. I feel so free.
Feels like 10 years.
Yes, I know it does. We've all aged a lot in the past 12 days. But anyway, so Rachel Reeves calls for global free trade fight back to protect the UK economy. Duncan, what's this story about?
So the Chancellor's written a piece for The Observer newspaper, talking about the importance of global free trade around the world. She's making it clear she's going to argue at a meeting of the International Monetary Fund later this month for a new, more balanced global economic and trading system, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I think we've seen the fallout of the tariffs, and let's be honest, tariffs are just taxes. Ultimately, they stop growth, they hinder growth, they make people poorer, things more expensive. I'm, as you've probably worked out, a bit of a free trade disciple, so I'm not a big fan of these. And it's good. I mean, I have been critical of the Chancellor in the past, but it's good to hear that she's talking about trying to get a deal with the US, also achieve an ambitious new relationship with the EU, and also a trade deal with India. And I don't want to revisit anything, but that you could argue is a Brexit bonus because we have the freedom to do all of that.
Or you could argue that there's a very easy way of improving our trading relationship with the EU, which is the one we had, where we didn't have to pay any kind of, we didn't have trading barriers.
But then we'd be lumped with the EU, you know, and they got the 20% and we got the 10%. I mean,
well, they haven't now. They haven't now, and we don't know where things are going to end up in in 90 days. But I think whatever, the indications are that even if we get a deal with the US, which will probably involve reduced taxes for the tech bros and those of us who've had our books stolen by Meta and so on, just having to swallow it, lump it, and those guys paying even less tax than they would otherwise have done, and chlorinated chicken. And we've been told that the likelihood is that even if we make all these compromises, we'll still have the 10% tariff. So, I mean, this is all... what could she do except say this kind of thing? But the reality, we'll have to see what the reality is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of uncertainty. And, Trump changed his mind today as well on the smartphones and tech. Now they'll be exempt. We'll see how that develops. Let's finish on the Sunday Express. A lovely headline here. Well, sort of. Dream on. Camilla had to laugh when asked if the king might take it easy. That's them coming back from their trip from Italy, where they were earlier this week. I think she was asked whether the king might slow down a little, ease on his workload, and she answered like so many women do when asked if their men are going to take it a little bit more easy. Christina.
I feel ganged up.
Well, they did have a very successful trip to Rome, and it was good to see that they were treated with a lot of love in Ravenna and Rome, obviously. I think, that King Charles is a workaholic. He works incredibly hard, and at weekends they often spend weekends apart because he's spending the whole time working through his red boxes. I mean, the Queen Elizabeth II was also an incredibly hard worker. So, but I think he's waited so long to be king. He's always worked incredibly hard. I know someone who worked for him. He worked till the early hours most nights. And, we're lucky to have someone who works so hard as Amon.
Duncan, you've got 3 seconds.
I saw him playing a carrot the other day with the London Vegetable Orchestra, and I just thought he was terrific.
Wonderful. On that, we'll leave it. We'll have more news on Sky News at 11. Join us then.